Dave and I actually went to film school 15 years ago and went through MAPS. We learned all of our skill set there. I head up the production department at Pro AV and sell all of this sort of equipment, as well as on the side I work doing ads, live streaming, a lot of event-based video work, and that's me in a nutshell.
So I went to film school with Daniel as well. I'm a freelance cinematographer, so I do a lot of commercials and a bit of drama and corporates and even events sometimes. My range is quite a lot. I also work at a camera rental company called Picture Hire Australia as well, so there's also like a knowledge of gear on that side as well.
So today, what we wanted to really do is just give you sort of some practical skills that you guys can pass on to students, and not just drill down into like the ins and outs of equipment, but something that you can apply with existing gear that you have or things that you may expand on in the future. So first of all, we were going to talk through some lighting demos. So we'll go through a basic 3-point lighting setup. And then I'll cover a little bit more about how that then applies to, say, green screen filming. And Dave, I'll be modelling today. You'll see me really big up on the screen, unfortunately. And Dave will be moving the camera around. Then following that, we'll just talk about doing some things about framing of shots and just some tips and tricks there.
I might just go through a couple of these lights here that we have on display, and I'll just sort of talk a little bit about them, and I won't go into too much detail to bore you, but obviously just shout out if anything doesn't make sense. So we've sort of brought like a little bit of a range because obviously lighting changes constantly, and that's one of the big things to know. And you sort of have to, like as a cinematographer, I also worked in the lighting department for a number of years, so I was pretty on top of a lot of the sort of lighting technologies and all that. And I guess one of the good things about what I do is I'm put in a lot of different situations, and you have to learn how to sort of deal with those and how to, like if I'm given this situation where I'd have to light an entire theatre, it's a challenge, and you may not be put up against that at any stage, but I've had to light theatre scenes a number of times. It's just part of that, and you sort of you do obviously develop that knowledge, and hopefully we'll be able to sort of pass on a little bit of that information to you. But generally with lighting, I find is that no matter what you sort of have at your fingertips, like there's a lot of really expensive lighting you can get for various reasons, and there's also some cheap lighting, but realistically, if you've got a light, you should be able to create something good out of it for not very, like the basics of lighting are pretty much, the same across, and that's sort of why I brought a couple of different things just to show you. So I guess I'll start off with something like this. So this is like a 1 foot by 1 foot LED panel. So it's an LED lighting. So as we know in our homes and stuff, LEDs obviously come a lot more prominent. One of the good things about LED is it's not very hot. So obviously a lot of older traditional film lights, which are still used today, are basically, it's like, they're called tungsten lights, and they're basically a coil that basically heats constantly, and the lights become quite hot. And the problem with that is obviously you've got these lights in the room for a long time, and they heat up the room, people get uncomfortable. But the good thing about LED is obviously it's a power saving thing, but also the colour's better, and it's generally not a hot light. So this is sort of like, I think pretty much all of these lights here today are LED. So this panel is, like I can turn it on. I'll try not to blind anyone with it. So that'll come up in a sec. So yeah, so this is probably one of the most used lights out there at the moment, and they come in various sizes and all that. The good thing about them is they've got, obviously, A, they're LED, B, they're dimmable, so obviously that's quite bright. So if I'm just sort of poking that over there, at Yvonne, was it? Yeah. And I'm like, whoa, she's way too bright. So I can actually go to it and dim it down. So I can go all the way down to there. Ah, yeah, that's much better. So that's one of the really good things about these lights, is it basically dims and there's no colour shift within that. Some of the older lights, because you're obviously dropping voltage on them, they can go a bit warmer. So that's one of the really good things about that. And with these LED lights, because it's quite hard as well, as you can see, you can sort of use it as a bit of a harder light, or you can soften it, and I'll sort of show you a couple of ways of doing that as well. Another good thing about some of these LED lights as well is you can often change the colour in it as well. So this one you can. So this is, I guess, with this at the moment, it's quite a white light, and this white light is sort of, it's sort of look at the moment is for like during the day essentially. So it's the same colour temperature as midday sun. But just say you want to go a bit, a bit warmer on it, like an indoor scene or something, you can actually adjust it down. And there we go. Actually, I might just change. Yeah, so as you can see from that, you can see her skin tone warms up a lot, and that's literally by warming the light up a bit. And we'll sort of show you in this 3-point demonstration how you can sort of use like a warmer and a cooler tone to just sort of get, like a little bit more out of an interview or something like that. So I guess, then this next bit here is what I call a reflector, and it's basically like a disc shape, and it's got like a silver and a black on it. As I said, I'll sort of show you how you can use those in a minute. But the good thing is it's basically just a bounce light. So as you said, even just from here at the moment, just literally kicking off that light, I'm able to, kick a bit of light into Daniel there. And these are really good because it allows you to just use less lights. So rather than setting up another light, you could easily use this to bounce into your subject.
If you're outdoors as well, a reflector is really good if you've just wanted to give a little bit of like what's called fill from like underneath or something like that, say under the chin, or if you've got really hard sunlight coming in from one side and then you wanted to just bounce back a little bit of light on the other side so it doesn't look like a horror film where they're cut down the middle or anything like that. So we'll be able to sort of show this pretty easily now that I'll jump in and model for you. And I don't want to look at myself on the screen. So while Dave's sort of setting these up, I think something that really separates sort of an amateur videographer or cinematographer is how you use lights and how you can, rather than just pointing a camera at somebody and working with what's called ambient light, so lights that are just around you, being able to shape and craft the light and position it will help you separate your background and really help you tell your story as well. And it can change the mood in a heartbeat, as I mentioned before. If you've got like sort of one half of the face really dark and one half of the face really light, it can be moody rather than just sort of a happy interview sort of look where you have lighting that's just flat, even, and not that interesting, but you don't need to tell a story when you're doing a basic interview unless it's sort of a really heartfelt thing, or if you're trying to shoot a current affair sort of thing and you wanted to silhouette someone, just put a really big light behind them, and there's lots of different tricks you can do with lighting. Yeah,
exactly. And I think what we're pretty much trying to start off on, and what you should always think about it, is like basically a blank canvas. So it's we're basically starting from that. And even if I was in a real life scenario, I'd probably shut that door. I'd probably lose these lights in here as well. Sometimes you don't always have that option, but wherever possible, you try and work from. You sort of build up. You start from completely black, and then sort of start adding lights, and then even taking them away if you want to. So, all right, let's start with, sorry if I blind anyone with this. So let's just start with this this first light. So, Daniel, sorry about that, mate. Okay, so what this first light is called the key light. Okay, so it's your main light being used in the scene. 90% of the time we're lighting faces. So that's the main thing about it, is you're lighting faces and always starting with the key. Sometimes you can literally just light with one light. You don't have to use more. Sometimes I do quite a lot of interviews where I'll literally use one light and then maybe I might just use a couple of other things that aren't lights to just add to it, and I'll show you. So we sort of start off with this as a light. Obviously that's way too bright, and we can change that a couple of ways. One is obviously we can dim the light down, as you can see, so that's still quite hot. And obviously Daniel's got a white shirt on, so thanks for that. But that's okay. No, that's, this is why we have to control things and deal with it.
I could have worn glasses for you as well.
Yeah, I was actually talking about that before. I was going to borrow somebody's glasses if we had to. But yeah, so just for example, this is like starting off with one light. Now, obviously at the moment, I'm not super happy with this for various reasons. One is obviously Daniel's shirt is quite white and quite clipping. So one of the problems with that is your eye is often drawn to that. So it's very important to sort of, I instinctively look at this and go, all right, that his shirt is the brightest thing in the scene. So my eye is drawn to that. And sometimes it can be drawn to something else. It can be something brighter in the background. That's fine, but that to me is, quite off-putting. So, I could literally, if I've just got this one light and a reflector, and that's all I can do, I could literally just sort of take this and put it on a stand or lean it up against there, and I could literally block it if I wanted to. So as you sort of see, I bring it up, okay? And that's obviously taking the exposure down a fair bit in terms of his shirt, okay? Obviously you can use a barn door as well, which is one of these, but obviously I'm probably not quite cutting off enough of that to do that, so yeah.
And something that Dave might touch on is this is what's called a soft light, so it's very hard to cut that light. If that was what's called a hard light, which we can show in a minute, you'll be able to put the barn door in and it will really just cut that line off wherever the barn door is. So.
Yeah, exactly. Well, one of these other lights is a bit of a harder light, so we'll be able to sort of show that. I might just stop down a little bit. So obviously one of the other ways we can adjust the exposure, obviously lighting-wise, is also through the aperture on the lens. So on a camera lens, and we'll probably go into this a little bit more afterwards, is it works similar to it's also called an iris, which is the same as what's in our eye. So obviously if a lot of light is being, is basically going into our eye, it'll shut down, and the camera aperture is doing the same. And we may touch on that a little bit potentially afterwards. Yeah. Okay. So I'll go back to this one light. So basically, as you sort of see, if I sort of move it around, so sort of see what that is doing to the shadow on the nose. Can you guys see that? So see, as I sort of move that around, it's affecting the way the light falls on his face. So if I go too far around, I've got that nose shadow there. So just obviously, it's not going to work. You can see it. So you can obviously see there's quite a harsh shadow on there. But it depends on the scene, obviously. I don't like it, personally. I prefer to obviously have it a bit more rappy and nice. So a lot of the time if I'm doing an interview and it's just, it's not like supposed to be really moody or anything like that. If it's, like most of the stuff you'll see on TV or in documentaries, will be, similarly lit so that you can basically, there's no nose shadow, and also you're getting light into both eyes. So just keep watching with me. So if I sort of move the light around this way, it gets a lot more sidey. So, I mean, that can also work. It makes it a lot more dark and moody, but we're obviously losing half the face like that, okay? Now, just say, has anyone got any glasses we can borrow that you don't mind us borrowing? Is that all right? I hope you're going to be all right with these, Daniel. Yeah, you're going to
see anything.
Yeah, you won't be able.
Cool.
Yeah, okay. So, obviously, this has nothing to do with my talk, actually. It's just all to do with Daniel. Why am I not getting any reflection in his eyes? That's weird. There you go.
They're filthy.
Yeah. So as you can see, one of the big challenges about lighting is sometimes you do get people with glasses and they don't want to take them off, and that's understandable. So you need to work around it. So more often than not, like you look at a situation like this, obviously people don't stay still either. So sort of move your head around, Daniel. So up and down, and you can see that light in the eye. Okay. So obviously, one way would be you can move the light further back, but more often than not, what I'll end up doing is just going, all right, let's just take it round like this. Like that maybe. Just move your head around again, Daniel. Okay, so there's still a little bit in there. It's not too bad. All right, so yeah, so we got that. And then I go, well, it's still a little bit shadowy there. So then what we can do is obviously just add some reflection. And then you can sort of add a little bit of reflection there, just to sort of like kick it back up, okay? All right, good. Okay, so let's just pretend Daniel doesn't have glasses. I'll take that off you. It takes a little bit more refining than that, obviously, but you sort of get the general gist. If we keep messing about with the glasses, we'll be here for the next 90 minutes. Okay, so for a 3-point interview, I'd probably start something like this. So for interviews, 45-degree angle is usually, quite a good angle to have a light on, because as I said, you've got the two eyes in there. Now, I'll probably also bring the light up a bit. Okay, and the reason I'm doing that is it's basically to try and, it's once again emulating the sun. The sun is high, it comes up, and it just creates a nice sort of downlight like that. If you come too low with the light, so, I probably should take this off again. So if I come down, I'm a bit lower with the light. As you can see, it's sort of creating this little spooky sort of uplight effect. So, which, can work, if you sort of go sort of underneath like that, it's a bit, like scary campfire story type thing. But then, you sort of move it back up again, and it becomes a bit more pleasant.
Bring to light people from low down, and same thing if you're shooting low down, unless you have a reason to, so.
Exactly. Okay, so that's our first light. Now, going back to the reflector, if you want to soften off this light even more, there's another part of this reflector, which is in the middle here. So this is basically what I would call diffusion. And the good thing about this is basically it means when you're putting diffusion in front of a light, it's not only softening it, but it's also spreading the light, okay? Which is a good thing. It's a bit like, an overcast day, essentially. So just say, okay, that's still a little bit harsh. I want to soften it off a little bit more, so I can pop that up in front. Oh, and it's in front of the camera. Very good. Good work, Dave. You did well there. Okay. Let's see if that works again. So yeah, so sort of see the difference there. It's quite a big difference. If you sort of take that away again and keep looking at Daniel's face, obviously it's softening and spreading. It's also obviously taking the harshness off that white shirt as well, so that's sort of matching. So I can sort of drop that back down again and look again. And as you can see, if you sort of look under Daniel's eyes, it just sort of takes the softening of the light just sort of takes, the bags under his eyes out a bit. And it's a lot more flattering, okay? Hey, look, you know, we're the same age, mate. It's I got the same problems. But yeah, it's one of those big things about, one of the main things is making your subjects look as flattering as possible. Sorry, Daniel. You knew this was going to happen, mate. So as simple as that, you can basically put diffusion in front. And you can also you can also move where it is. So if I sort of come, obviously I'll get my frame again. But obviously, you know, moving it sort of closer and further away makes it, you know, like has a different effect on it. So yeah, there you go.
On set, generally someone looks up or can assist you with lighting. It's called a gaffer. That they'll come out and their job is to work with the cinematographer to create the look that they're wanting to do. And it can sometimes, when you're working on set, be very frustrating watching how long it takes to relight a scene. So the idea is that once you set things up, you try not to move it around too much and think about trying to minimise the amount of setups you have to do during a day, so your day keeps moving quickly.
Okay, so let's just we'll go back to Daniel again. I'll just flick this off just so I can sort of go back to where we were before. Okay. Right, okay, so you sort of look at that. So we're going back to just one light at the moment, one light only, and we've got our diffuser in it. Now I'm just sort of looking at the face at the moment. So one of the good things about this is, as you can see in the eyes, there's two dots, all right? Obviously that's our light, but it looks pretty natural. One of the good things about using a diffuser in front of it is because it's circular rather than square, if you're seeing that sort of little reflection, a square is a little bit more unnatural, I think, personally. I much prefer, obviously, that tiny little circle in the eyes is a lot more natural. If I take the diffuser out, it may not be that distracting, but I always like to have a sort of a circular sort of look in the eye rather than that. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. One of the good things about the angle of the light, as you're sort of seeing, is there's a little bit of shadow on the other side of the face. That just creates a bit of depth, okay? So obviously before, when I sort of had the light around here, like a little bit more frontal, if I sort of move that, it flattens the image out a lot. So if I go like that, so see how there's a lot more, it's sort of very evenly lit on both sides of the face, which is perfectly fine if you like that. But as I sort of go back to it, it's quite flat. And, you know, sometimes that can work quite nicely, but I sort of like going on a little bit more of an angle just to create a little bit more shape there. So, okay, cool. Okay, so that's your key light. Now, just say, no, I want a little bit more, that shadow area, I'm not really liking it that much. Then you move to your second light, which is your fill, okay? So this is where this light's going to come in. So I'm going to just flick that on. Okay, so let's have a look.
While Dave's just moving the light around, something that's important to talk about is size of the lighting source. So you can have like quite a small lighting source, but again, it's a lot more flattering if you have a large diffuse source. So that's why you'll see things like the diffuser here that we've got is now, I think it's about 120 centimetres wide. Even if we had quite a small hard light source behind that, it softens it out and makes it look a little bit nicer. The only trade-off to doing this is the light spills into other areas, so you may have to be mindful of that. But having a big, large source is a lot nicer than having a hard light.
Yeah, it's generally the bigger the source, the softer the source. Okay, so just going off that. So once we've added the fill in, that's sort of what your fill is doing essentially. It's just evening out the face, evening out the shadows. Now, obviously, that's way too bright at the moment. With the fill, as far as I'm concerned, it should always be not as hot as the key. So the key should be the main light. The fill should always be darker. So I'm just going to go down and dim this down a bit.
Dave will probably argue with me about this, but as a guide, I find just a simple way to remember it, if you had your key light at 100% your fill light, if it's at the same distance away, would be roughly 50 to 60% of that level of brightness. And that's also then replicated by if you had the reflector on the other side filling out, it loses some of that bounce back. And then we'll talk about a backlight in a minute, and that's less bright again.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Daniel, absolutely. Okay, so that's basically what the fill's doing, is just it adds a little bit extra. So if I sort of turn that off again, just so you can on and off it, okay, and adding the fill, yep, and just adds a little bit more into there. So and then so that's obviously our second light. Now with our third light, it's obviously the backlight. So I'll pop that in now.
Something you can also do to speed this up, like if I was a high-profile talent, which I'm not, you wouldn't light me. You'd have someone sit in to do this before they walk into your interview, and that way, you're not wasting their time, and you can have a camera assistant or someone with ideally similar skin tone just to help you light it, and that way the talent can just walk in. Shoot the scene and get out.
Yeah, I generally find that most of the time, just having a body in there, you can sort of tweak. But yeah, in general, you shouldn't have your talent just sitting there for ages. Just waiting around for you. Okay, so so this is our third light, which is the backlight. So with this one here, basically what it's doing is it's separating your subject from the background. So that's one of the really good things about it, is obviously with that light back there, it's creating a little bit of edge on Daniel's hair. It just sort of separates him out from the background. So once again, I'll come over to here and I'll just turn it on and off for you so you can have a look. Okay, yep, so that's off and that's on. So it just creates a little bit more, a bit of a different look. So yeah, it's very good. Yes.
Are there any common lighting setups just to would it be more common to use key and that as opposed to key and fill?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully you all heard that, but basically it was, is there any sort of scenarios where you're just using two lights, so a key and a back? So yeah, absolutely. Honestly, I often use that for interviews. Like I sort of said before, I don't really like adding fill, especially as a light. I prefer to use like this sort of disc reflector thing. So one example I'll just show you now is I'll take this one off. Okay, and then we've sort of got, so he's still sort of being brought out from the background. Just have a look over here, Daniel. Yeah, so you can still see, like that's obviously with no fill whatsoever, but you can literally grab, so you could just do that and obviously just fiddle with your key, and maybe you just want to go, okay, let's just come over a little bit more. Because now that you're lighting with just two lights, you can afford to, you could probably afford to sort of move this around a little bit more without flattening it out too much. And there is also, I'll show you another little trick as well, which will just sort of bring a bit of shape back into it. So I'll just move that over a little bit. Yeah, so you could do that, obviously just by moving the light around. Another little trick, if you just want to have two lights, is either have another one of these, but I'll sort of show you just with the white. So as you might have seen before, just before I put it up, this has got like a white material on it, and then it's got like a silver and gold here, and then on the other side, there's black, and there is silver. Now, what I tend to do, if I'm adding fill, I always use white because it's less harsh, or I'll use the black to actually take away some of the light, which I'll show in a sec. Silver is more if you're in sort of sun, so if you're shooting and it's an overcast day and there's not a lot of direct sun, I might use silver because it obviously adds some extra ping. If you're dealing with, if you put silver up on like a really bright day, it can be a lot, like almost, it's a little bit hard here to sort of show you. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of a little bit hard to see here, but it just adds a little bit too much fill in. But if I go the white side, thank you, Daniel. You sort of see it's a lot softer for that sort of wrap around on the face. So if I sort of drop that down again, yep, so that you're losing it there. On the other hand, what you can do, and what I often do with interviews, is I actually use the black side, just which is called negative fill. So rather than just fill, it's called negative fill. Yeah, so if I sort of go... it's a little bit hard, obviously, with that. So yeah, if I sort of bring it right in, you can sort of see that shadow. So just drop it down again, yeah. Yeah, anyway, it's a little bit hard with two of us, but I think you get the picture. So that's three-point lighting in a very, very, very quick wrap-up at the moment. And obviously with that, I guess with the backlight, you could also, like I've dimmed that down a fair bit. If I bring it up, obviously you can make it harder. So for example, if I sort of bring it up like quite a lot more, that's obviously quite harsh, but then I might be like, I kind of like that. And then the interviewee suddenly goes, I don't want my face on television. I mean, you can still see him, but you get the point.
I'll talk like this ruffled through the microphone. You won't be able to identify.
Yeah, so, I mean, I'd be taking away even more light for that, but it's actually just creating a silhouette. Obviously, we're getting a little bit of light bleed. Yeah, there you go. So that's your classic, a current affair. Anyway, I won't go any more into it. You know what I mean.
I used to work on a current affair a long time ago, and yeah, it's like you get the same footage given to you two ways, and it's like make this person look terrible or make this person look really glowing, really good. If you don't have a reflector or one of those handy, you can just use like large sheets of white paper or like what's called a bounce board. So like core flute works quite well, and you can just have that on a solid sheet. That's a really good way to involve another student in something as well. So you can only have so many hands around on the camera, but if you've got someone there, holding a reflector or something like that, and this is a fantastic way to teach how lighting works as well. If you can show it up on a screen, have someone model and see how the light moves around something, it's a lot easier to do it. And then rather than show an example, go back and review it where you can practically move things as it happens. So you won't all have the luxury of a 500-inch screen.
Okay, so I guess one other little thing in regards to three-point lighting is we might just, I don't know whether I touched on it, but basically what I always try to do is have the subject facing the key. So at the moment, what that means obviously is Daniel is facing my key light. And if I was in this interview situation, so if I've got somebody interviewing next to me, I'll have this person on this side. So basically, so Daniel's eyeballing this way. More often than not, it's a lot more pleasing to have the person conducting the interview, the interviewer, sort of as close to the lens as possible, because obviously that means the eyes are as close to the lens as possible rather than eyeballing them. So I guess if we just sort of look, so just say, obviously our interview is not blocked by that light, but you just sort of see that both of Daniel's eyes are sort of clocked on there. Now, if we bring Daniel's eyes around here, you know, if we put the interview, yeah, it's obviously a lot more uncomfortable. I don't know why you do that, but, you know, some people do. And then on the other side, if you sort of come around this way, Daniel, so you're facing away from your key light. So it's just a lot less flattering. Okay, good.
Great. Well, I'm going to swap with Dave now. We're going to talk about some framing, and Dave can sit in the middle, and I'm going to make his life difficult.
Perfect.
Just before we do talk about framing, we'll just quickly touch on lighting for green screen. So if you've got a subject that you're lighting for green screen, the three-point lighting principle, or however you choose to light that person, still applies. You basically just need more lights to light for green screen. So if we had this set up here, and we'll pretend that the green screen is directly behind me, you would have green screen, and you would have a light here shooting at the screen, and a light on the other side. A light on the other side shooting at the screen, and try not to have that spilling onto the back of Dave at all. Another mistake that a lot of people often make is when you are filming with green screen, is that people place them right up against the back of the green screen. What will happen then is you get what's called spill, and spill is the green light reflecting off the screen and onto me or onto Dave. If I was wearing a white shirt, it would be very problematic, and it makes it harder to key out in post, and you get a really furry key. So in an ideal world, what you want to do is keep that person at least 2 meters off the screen, and due to the luxury of green screen, you only actually have to have the green screen covering Dave's back here. You don't actually, like, even if the camera was shooting off to the side, and you could see bits that weren't green screen, because you could just have to cut it out. It just has to fill around Dave as a section. And the other light in green screen that is the most important light, other than having a really evenly lit screen, is the backlight. And the reason for that is it will help shape the, around Dave's hair. You'll get nice clean lines, and it's a harder light to make sure that you get a clean key.
Yeah, one little trick I do when I light in green screen is, just as Daniel was saying with the fact that you don't want your green screen light spilling onto your subject, is obviously you want to light this green screen separately to your subject. So one thing I will do is I'll light my screen first, and then don't have any light on my subject. And because the subject will be silhouetted, like Daniel was before in his current affair interview, you can actually see if there's any sort of spill going back, and it's usually obviously of a green reflective nature, and it just sort of gives you an idea of whether you're getting that spill. So generally, light your screen. You'd agree with that, Daniel, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
light
definitely.
your screen first and separately, then start bringing in the lights for your subject. Yeah.
And having reasonable powered lights to light the green screen will also stop you getting shadows from all of these. So people often with lighting go, oh, there's shadows on my green screen, so they turn up all of the other lights. What the ideal way to do that is actually take away light. So turn down all of these lights instead of just putting more light onto the screen, because you get more bounce and other issues. So, and that taking away light applies to all of these things as well. So if you didn't want to stop down the iris on your camera, you would turn the power down on the lights, and that's the beauty of LEDs. They're mostly dimmable. So,
Yeah, exactly.
so I'm going to talk about framing now, and again, this is a guide. There are sort of no hard rules when it comes to this, and there's always a reason to break this, but as a starting point, these are some techniques that you might want to pass on. So look, this is sort of like a medium shot, medium close-up of Dave, and look, it's something that I think you'd probably all see in an interview if you actively watch televisions, or actively watch television, you'd see this shot quite a lot. But what I wanted to talk about here was partly when Dave was talking about moving the interviewer around, when Dave's looking at the key light over here, or the interviewer just over to the side, because he's off camera there, we want to keep his eye line following through the shot. So we wouldn't frame up this shot like this if he's looking off to the left. So if Dave's looking off to the left, we wouldn't frame him up looking onto the right, because what happens there is we're cutting off Dave's eye line, and it's actually quite uncomfortable to look at because there's all this negative space over on the left-hand side of the shot. So if rule of thumb is if they're looking left, leave lots of space on the right, and the other way around. Then same goes for head height in a shot. So we don't want to before I move on to that, it's okay to cut someone off if you have a reason to do it. Like if you were trying to, actually I won't go into that.
Are you talking about the eye line? Yeah. What I would recommend is, as much as possible, when you're watching Netflix, put a doco on, and more the way interviews are being lit and shot is changing a lot. And a lot of the doco stuff I've been doing differently has been way different to anything I've ever shot before, and it's almost a bit counterintuitive. There's a lot more docos where they do actually break that rule, where it'll be the eye line will be a lot more close to camera, because it's more, they say it's a little bit more isolating, it sort of isolates the subject. But it's a very, it's an artistic choice, and it sort of has to match in, like if you sort of look at a lot of these sort of Netflix series that are quite highly produced, like if you watch Wild Wild Country, I'd highly recommend watching that for like strange framing. It really works, but it's good to watch that and then just watch a more traditional documentary and just sort of like compare the way it works and the way it doesn't work. But I would say like 99% of the interviews me and Daniel would do is the traditional way of doing it.
Yep, so this is the traditional way, and then the non-traditional way is more like that. I need a slightly tighter lens to do that. So next bit that I'd like to talk about is just headroom. So as a guide, you don't want to cut the top of someone's head off. You'd find that's a little bit uncomfortable because we've cut the top of Dave's head off here. Because we're in a medium close-up shot, we have no reason to lose the top of his head. So as a guide, I would say that in a medium close-up like that, if you look at the height of Dave's forehead, which is large, we'll take the top of that and then add that to the top of the frame, and that's sort of a nice rule to work by. If you take sort of the height of someone's forehead and then add sort of half of it to above their head in the shot, the tighter you go in the shot, the less you have to apply that. So I might just move the camera forward.
Shots fired, Daniel.
Yeah. So we've got like in a tight shot. Actually, I'll start wide. In a really wide shot, you again wouldn't just leave sort of a forehead's height above. The tighter you go into a shot, as I zoom in, I would have like a full head height at least above his head there. But yeah, the tighter you move in, the less headroom you have to give on your shot. And then as we get into a close-up or an extreme close-up, we are comfortable to then cut the forehead off, the top of the head off, rather than then sort of leaving space above. You'd always, in my opinion, leave space at the bottom and not cut the head off. So that's sort of headroom in a nutshell. Going back to where people are looking off either side of the camera, generally if you've got someone framed up in the centre of the camera, they're going to be delivering the message directly down the barrel of the lens rather than off to the side. So like more of your newsreader kind of look or a teleprompter. So that's someone delivering a message to cameras if they are engaging with the audience, and if they're looking off camera, so just off to an interviewer, you would then maybe push them off to a side because it looks a little bit uncomfortable just having them straight in the centre of frame but looking off camera. So some of you might have seen this when you're teaching. This is it's called a grid, but it is really easy for teaching what's called a rule of thirds for making up image composition. Again, only a guide, but you'll see where the points intersect of the lines, where those 4 points are. Basically, they are points of interest within a frame where the eye can be naturally drawn to. So you would be placing things like someone's mouth or someone's eyes over those. So.
Yeah, like your eyes at the moment are right on that crosshair. So if I place it there, yeah, it's rather comfortable. Do you want me to sit back down? You can.
So yeah, with that in mind, if we push in a little bit, we've got sort of Dave's eyes and Dave's mouth sort of at intersecting points on that frame. Whilst you wouldn't obviously see the grid in your finished product, the eye can be naturally drawn to these places, and it can be a lot better than framing them like out of that. But this can be taught without having to look at it live on camera. You can just get a frame and draw up like where you would place your subject ideally for different types of shots, whether it's a close-up, wide shot and so on. And then again, the rule of thirds is helpful for when you've got, say, 2 people in the frame and you would do on a wider shot, I can go, you might have someone off to the intersecting lines on the left and some off to the intersecting lines on the right. Probably next thing I want to talk about, and I'll let Dave pick up and move the camera in this, is the difference between using between moving the camera and just zooming in. So the reasons why you would ideally move the camera rather than just zooming in is it changes the shape of the face. The other bit to talk about would be when you move the camera forward, just what happens to the background, and then and so on. So yeah. So the goal here is that we're achieving the same shot, like the same framing, but moving the camera and adjusting the zoom rather than just, I want a tighter shot, I'll leave the camera at the back there and then just zoom in on the lens. It can be, it is a little bit confronting having the camera this close to you when you are being interviewed or if you're acting sometimes, but it has benefits for depth of field, it has benefits for what you can see in the background and so on. So.
Yeah, as you can see at the moment, what I am on is on quite a wide lens. So it's obviously a wide lens, has a wider field of view, so you can see more in the frame. And what I've literally done is move the camera on a wide lens here. Obviously, one of the problems with that is, as you can sort of see, if you look, mainly where you can see it is obviously in the face. Like, you look at Daniel's nose, and Daniel's nose is a lot more accentuated at the moment. So, yeah, so I guess one of the things about that is it's obviously not as flattering, Nobody wants to accentuate the nose. That's not great. So obviously with the framing of that it's better to sort of like come back and sort of like zoom in on a longer lens. So an 18mm is a wider lens, and then, maybe something like an 85mm is a longer lens, and it compresses the image a lot more and it's a lot more flattering. Okay, so that's a wide lens, quite close, quite confronting. Keep that in your mind, and then I'll sort of just move back and zoom in. You'll just sort of notice the difference it does to the face and how it's a lot more flattering. So as you can see, it sort of compresses the frame a lot more. It's a lot more natural looking, and it also because you're on a longer lens, it puts the background out of focus a lot more. You know, longer lens, generally shallower depth of field, a bit more cinematic looking.
And then the other thing that you may have seen in productions is what's called a dolly. So a dolly is when you have the camera on tracks, and rather than zooming in to do the close-up, moving the camera is a far more preferable way of creating that zoom effect than, or that movement of the camera than just zooming in on the lens. And look, in recent times, the dolly on smaller productions has become less and less needed. Dave, do you want to grab the Ronin and just turn that on? So we've got a pretty, something that we see every day, but a pretty cool piece of kit. Students love to get the tech side sometimes, and actually all camera people just like tech. But this is what's called a gimbal or a stabilizer. So rather than having to lay down tracks, and we still want to be able to move the camera and create a smooth shot, we won't be able to unfortunately show you back up on the screen, but this will take out the the handheld shake and a little bit of the bounce from when Dave's walking, and then, so Dave, just want to sort of do it to one extreme, just like you can move the camera, and basically the lens will stay pretty much in one position. So it's doing this by having 3 axes of motors to create lots of different shots. And if you wanted to then track in rather than having a dolly, so Dave would walk in, that's far more preferable than just zooming in on the lens. It changes the framing a lot. So, and I bet your bottom dollar you'll see one of these on pretty much every shoot now. Once upon a time, this was sort of a specialised skill, being a Steadicam operator, and took decades of practice to get really good at it. And now this is something that for $100 you can get one of these for your mobile phone, and it stabilises out everything, but then still gives you the ability to move in. Some of the better ones on the market give you the ability to adjust the focus of the camera as well while you're working with it via that knob that's on the right-hand side of that gimbal. Yeah, but yeah, if I could say one thing, move the camera, don't use zoom. That's why you'll see people use what's called a set of prime lenses more so than, or higher-end cinematographers use prime lenses rather than zooms. They're sharper, they can be more cost-effective, and it's a better discipline to learn. The only reason why someone may use a zoom is if they had to work really quickly and didn't have the luxury of changing lenses or had to reframe, or for live event work.
Yeah, a lot of the TV networks now are doing filming on, like you would have seen them out there. Sorry, Brad, I'll move over here. You see they've still got those big cameras on their shoulders for out in the field and all that, and that's to obviously, they've got a zoom lens on it, it's got a lot of range, because obviously with news and documentary as well, you need to sort of capture things quickly. Any documentary I've ever done, I've always been on zooms if it's very fly on the wall. And then, so because obviously the most important thing is capturing the action. But then what the news guys are doing nowadays is anytime there's an interview, it's a totally different camera, and usually there's a prime lens on it, because obviously then while they're sitting down, they can make the interviews look much nicer, whack the background out of focus. And I've found documentaries very much the same, is that as soon as I've got a sit-down interview, I usually end up sticking a prime lens on. They're sharper, they're usually, obviously, because it's a prime, like a fixed focal length lens, it's usually got a much wider aperture, so obviously less light and all that sort of stuff, so.
And then, lastly, I thought I'd just summarise it just by talking about kits that might fit into like a school level of environment. Like, it's all well and good for us to show off to do this with a camera that's $15,000 and a lights that are a couple of grand each. But you can achieve all of these things with lower end lighting. You don't have to go for the high end. We just brought this because it's what we had on hand. What I would suggest that you look at, rather than getting more of your traditional video camera into to a teaching environment, look more so into like an entry-level digital SLR or mirrorless camera, something that you can change the lenses on. It also depends on what year level that you're teaching at. Like, if you're primary school, you're probably not going to go out and give someone a whole bunch of little bits where it can easily get broken. But yeah, sort of that year 8 and above, I find that an entry-level DSLR starting at $1,000 with a basic kit lens can be something that they can grow and use over many years. And that way you can also grow your kits as your budgets sort of happen over a 5-year period or whatnot, by buying additional lenses and then adding lighting kits separately and audio kits and so on. Something we haven't talked about today at all is audio. We're cinematographers, we don't care about audio. Someone else does that. But yeah, having something with a microphone input is really important, and also headphone output, for 2 reasons. Having a mic input so you can run a lapel microphone or have a better boom mic is key, as well as a headphone output so you can hear what you're recording while it's recording. And that's why you can also involve more students, so you can have a boom operator running out, and that can be one person, and then another person can that person can either have the headphones on, or you can have another student with the headphones on, making sure that everything is going well, and someone behind the camera, and then someone assisting with lighting, and that way you can have sort of 4 people around one kit and all being sort of practically contributing to it at one time. There are reasons why you would buy a video camera, for things like if you were filming sport at the school or something like that. Having a traditional, or having an SLR is probably not ideal for when you're wanting to zoom in and out all the time. It can be difficult, and you want something with a really long zoom range, so more of a traditional video camera. I've got a couple of flyers here that you're welcome to grab at the end if you see fit, just with a couple of options with some educational specials. But then we've got some entry-level lighting kits as well. They start from something that you're not wasting your money towards. You'll see really cheap stuff on eBay, and it is good, but it will break, and then once it's broken, you can't get parts for it, and it becomes waste. So something that, in an educational environment, you want something that you can easily get spare parts for, and it's going to be around for a long time, because you can replicate those kits one after the other if you need to. So a basic lighting kit with a couple of stands for something with a soft light that you can use for a key light. Again, another soft light for the fill, or you could use it as the backlight, like under $500 with stands and whatnot, and then you can add batteries to them from there. All right, well, thanks for listening.